Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm drawing Euroc's in my alternate styles. In a previous video, I mentioned that I wanted to do a video where I draw Euroc's in my alternate styles. And so I made that announcement in that video and also announced that I'd be doing this in a YouTube short. You're able to request which style you want me to draw your character in, being normal style, anti-style, hyper style, or chibi elf style. Sadly, I wasn't able to fit in doing a picture in my normal style, so we'll only be drawing in my other styles today. But anyways, let's see who I'm drawing first. This character is created by Ephemeral Opal. The character's name is Lucio, he's a male, and he's 1,320 years old. He is also an elf. Lucio works as an herbalist, collecting and studying herbs as well as making remedies and medication out of them. Despite working in the healthcare industry, he himself isn't in the best of health, as he was born with a heart abnormality. This inspired him to work in healthcare to help others like himself and try to find a way to alleviate his condition. So let's start drawing a Lucio. Ephemeral Opal said I could draw Lucio in either my chibi elf style or my normal style. I decided to go with my chibi elf style because right when I saw the character, I thought he looked like a great fit for it. If you're new here, my chibi elf style is a more simple style of mine, and the characters I draw in it are most often elves. If you want to hear more about it, I recommend watching this video. At first I thought the mushroom part of his head was a part of his head, but turns out it's a hat. So for his pose, I decided to have one hand on his hip and the other reaching up for his hat. When doing my rough sketches, I often like to zoom in on my canvas and draw them at a smaller size. I'm not totally sure why I do this, to be honest. I think it's because I don't like feeling limited by the canvas's edges when I'm sketching. It makes things often feel kind of cramped and like I don't have a ton of space. So if I zoom in and draw smaller, I can just sketch however I want without thinking about the edges of the canvas. Plus, I often find drawing smaller helps me not focus on the details so much and helps me stay looser. Once I like the smaller sketch, I resize it to better fit the canvas and start working on the cleanup sketch. In this video, I talked a bit about how for the chibi elf style, I want to keep it looser and sketchier. But I also mentioned that being looser can be tricky for me and that I like to clean things up. Well, my kind of solution for that is that for this style, I'm going to try to only allow a rough sketch and then a more clean sketch. I won't do a third pass or do line art. This makes it so things stay sketchier because I have a hard time tightening things up if I'm only doing one pass. For my chibi elf characters, their shapes are kind of more simple and round, but for Lucio I wanted to try to make the shapes a bit more elongated and a bit more pointy. I thought this would help him look a bit more boyish. His characteristics are a bit more on the feminine side, so I was trying my best to make things feel a bit more masculine, so he still reads as a male character. I'm not totally sure if I succeeded, but I tried. I really love drawing his outfit. The looser top with puffy sleeves and high-waisted pants were totally down my alley and were super fun to work with. I always like when I get to work with looser sleeves because it often makes the arms a lot easier to draw for me. For the color of this sketch, I'm using a warm brown. This helps my sketch feel less harsh and a bit more inviting. That sounds like a funny way to describe a color for a sketch, but it makes sense, I feel like. The brown will go nicely with the colors and won't be as jarring as black would be. Also, I feel like I mentioned this a lot, but people always ask, and the brush I'm using for cleaning up this sketch is the Right Burrow pen, and I got it from the Clip Studio Paint asset library. I'm not to the coloring yet, but when I do, I will be using my custom brush that I made in this video. If you want to try it, it's free to download from the CSP asset library. Also, I'm really glad I did post my brush to the library. For some reason, Clip Studio Paint keeps not saving changes that I make to the workspace. Like I'll install a new brush or change settings for my color palettes, and they will reset when I open Clip Studio Paint again. Because of this, I actually lost my brush that I made, and I was a bit sad for a moment. But I was super happy I could re-download my brush from the asset library, so I didn't have to remake it. It would have been really sad if I lost it, because I worked really hard to make it. But yeah, I need to figure out why Clip Studio Paint isn't saving the changes I make to my workspace. But now I am applying the colors using my watercolor brush. For a lot of the coloring, I tried my best to stay zoomed out, mostly so that the coloring would stay looser and a bit more messy. If I stay zoomed out, it's harder to see and worry about the details. And like I said, I'm trying to make things feel more loose and natural and like traditional watercolor. When applying the color, I do a pass without lifting my brush to apply the base color. While doing this, I will try to vary the pressure of my pen so the base gets a bit of variation in it. After the first pass, I will often do a second pass by lifting my brush and applying the color again to make shadows. My brush is set to a blending mode that makes the colors darken and layer if I lift my brush, so it's a fast way to make shadows. The coloring for this overall was pretty quick. This made me happy because I am considering using this style to illustrate Pariah's story if I ever do. So I'm glad I was able to execute it pretty quickly, and I will probably get faster at it the more I do it. Also, I really like Lucio's color scheme. The mix of creams, pinks, and browns are all very pleasing to look at, and his design is very elegant. I had a ton of fun drawing him. Plus, I always just really like drawing in my chibi elf style. Oh, I did almost forget his choker. I somehow didn't notice it at first, but thankfully I did end up noticing it. I just added it on top of my drawing and reapplied the colors to make it work. Lastly, for the background, I just applied a wash of color and played around with the different colors until I was pleased. And here's my drawing of Lucio in my chibi elf style. This was super fun to do, and it was great to put my new brush to practice on an illustration of a character that isn't mine. I hope you like the drawing Ephemeral Opal, and thank you so much for letting me draw him. So let's see who I'm drawing next. This character is created by Dreamy Boba. Their character's name is Rain, and she's 15 years old. Rain loves pastel colors and reading her Bible. So let's start drawing Rain. Dreamy Boba requested I draw Rain in my hyperstyle, and I think she'd be a perfect fit for it. I really wanted to play around with her hair and its shape. If you don't know, my hyperstyle, as the name suggests, takes things from my normal style and makes them kind of go to the extreme. So the eyes are super shiny, the hair is very fluffy and big, everything is super colorful, and the character's proportions are more stylized and are very round. For Rain's pose, I kept it fairly simple. I decided to have her holding her Bible with the one hand, and she's pointing up with the other hand. Since she likes to read her Bible and it's one of the few characteristics I got for Rain's personality, I thought I'd base the illustration around her holding it. Plus, I think it's a cute pose. Now it's time for a cleanup. One characteristic of my hyperstyle is that the eyelashes do not connect to the eyes, they kind of float there, and the other details like little hair strands also float. Rain seemed to have a pointier eye shape, so I decided to make the lashes shapes be a bit sharper to make them match Rain's design. My character Doris has very round eyes, so it was very easy to make her eye shape fit with this style. So drawing Rain's eye shape was a fun thing to try to do. When drawing in my hyperstyle, I do have to remind myself to keep shapes round. It's kind of funny because I do think of my normal style as being fairly round and soft, but I do naturally include a mixture of curving and sharp lines, and this is a good thing. It's good to have variety in shapes and lines to help keep things dynamic and interesting. However, for this style, I'm purposely trying to keep things round. So for things like her shirt collar or her Bible, I make sure to keep the corners more wide and round compared to narrow and sharp. Also, I really like drawing hands in my hyperstyle. It's fun to simplify them into the rounder shapes and have them be more stubby and round. It makes them a bit easier to draw since they are less complicated than how I usually draw hands. That is the interesting part about working in my other styles. I find I'm able to get more done because everything is a bit more simple to do than usual. This is why I'm able to fit 3 illustrations into this video instead of only doing 2 like I have been doing recently. Like I said, I was going to shoot for 4, but there was a complication with the last piece that we will talk about when I get to it. Anyways, now we are going on to the coloring. Usually at this point, I am on to the line art, but my hyperstyle has more of a lineless look, so I instead draw and fill in the different parts of the picture with the correlating colors. This part is often fun, but also tedious, mostly just because I'm trying to figure out how to arrange the layers to make it so it's easy for me to fill in areas, so I don't have to do a ton of tracing for each shape. I often end up having to move my layers around a lot as I go and fill areas in. I could technically make the thinking part simpler by just carefully tracing out the shapes exactly as they should be shaped, but a lot of times it's a lot easier if I can just layer things and draw into the shapes. In some cases though, where it's a small area and I don't really want to rearrange my layers again, I will just trace around the shapes, instead of kind of cheating it by drawing under layers. Once the base colors are done, I go in and outline some parts with line art. I also include the eyes in this stage. Like I said, my hyperstyle does have more of a lineless look, but to help define and separate shapes, I like to add some line art just to make things easier to read and understand. This part's always kind of fun to me. I like using the different colors and outlining different spots. I don't know, for some reason it's always just really satisfying to me. Now I can start rendering. I started with the eyes because I didn't want to be looking at soulless black circles the entire illustration. For the hyper eyes, I make the highlights very big and round. Besides that, I'm still kind of experimenting with how I render them. I tried something a little different from what I previously did. I took things from my normal style, but also tried to mush it with the way I rendered Doris's eye in this picture. I do add some extra sparkles later, and those are a lot of fun. Rain has very voluminous hair, so in drawing her I tried not to shy away from making it large and fluffy. I drew very round curving shapes, almost like a cloud. I also applied the shadows to it in a way that makes the hair look a bit more like a combination of round forms instead of individual curly hair strands. It's kind of a funky way to stylize it, but I also feel like it's kind of fun. Since this is my hyperstyle, I try to keep the shading and highlights very saturated and bright feeling, and also use a lot of colors. So I've been having a bit of a dilemma recently. A lot of times I will update you all on what's going on in my personal life. I most of the time do this when I'm not sure what to talk about for the drawing footage, or I just don't have much to say about the footage, but I don't want to cut it all out. My dilemma, I guess, is that I know many of you like hearing updates about what's going on with me, but some of you have expressed that you don't like hearing about what's going on in my life, especially when it comes to my relationship with my fiance, or just how progress on the wedding is going. And I do understand I have mentioned him and the wedding a bit more in recent videos, but that's because him and planning the wedding is a big part of my life right now. And besides that, I don't have a ton else going on in my personal life. Recently, my life has been YouTube work, spending time with my fiance and family, and planning the wedding. So it's kind of all I'm able to talk about during parts of the video where I'm not talking about the art. Also, I do want to clarify, I do often run things that I plan to say in videos by my fiance, or I'll ask him if it's okay if I talk or tell you all about a certain thing. I don't want to share anything that he's not also comfortable with me sharing. But yeah, I know not every single one of you cares about what's going on in my personal life, but I also know there are many of you that do like to hear what's going on in my personal life. So for now, I'll keep giving you updates on the wedding planning and how things are going. And if you don't like it, I guess you can mute me for a little bit or something, I don't know. For the wedding, things are going well. We booked the ceremony space and found my dress. I got to go with some of my family and we had a good time. It's kind of funny because I actually chose the first dress I tried on. I thought it'd be my least favorite, but it turned out to be the one I liked the most out of all of the ones I tried. So yeah, I went with the first one I tried on. I would show you a picture, but it's staying a secret for now. One thing that is a bit tricky at the moment is finding a space for the reception. So far, everything I've looked into has been booked, so wish me luck for finding a space. Anyways, back to the picture. For this picture, I do feel like I was struggling with coloring a bit. I don't know, I really liked how the coloring turned out in Doris's picture, and I was trying to kind of replicate that, but was struggling. I did try my best to include different colors and make all the shading fun, but I feel like it doesn't pop as much as it does in my first illustration. That is the tricky part about working in different styles. I can't just go on autopilot like I do sometimes for my normal style. I draw in my normal style so much I can often do things without thinking too much, but for doing things outside my usual, I have to think a lot more. So yeah, I feel like the coloring could have been better. Maybe I could have included more colors or tried to include more contrast or something. I'm not even totally sure what I wanted to do, I just feel like it could have turned out a bit better. Oh, also, I added sparkles to the eyes to kind of mimic Rain's eyes in the first picture. I loved adding these. I feel like they were a really fun touch. And here's my finished picture of Rain. She was super fun to draw in my hyper style, and thank you so much to Dreamy Boba for letting me draw your character. She's so cute. I've actually seen her many times before, because I do know you've submitted her before, but I always thought she was super cute. So I'm really happy I finally got to draw her. This last character I'm drawing was created by Iz. Their character's name is Trix, and Trix is an anthropomorphic caterpillar, specifically a hickory-horned devil caterpillar. So let's start drawing Trix. Iz requested that I draw Trix in my anti-style. If you don't know, my anti-style is kind of the opposite of my usual style. It's very sharp, pointy, and more messy. Like I mentioned earlier, I had planned to do 4 illustrations, one of them being in my normal style. However, like I also mentioned, I hit a bit of a complication with this piece. So I had spent a pretty good amount of time planning out my illustration for Trix, and wanted to have her be in a dynamic pose. It's not the one you're seeing me sketch out right now. It was a full body standing pose, and I really tried to play with the perspective and make it dynamic. I really liked how it was going, and I put a good amount of thought into it. I had fully sketched it out and was cleaning it up when my sister Reagan started to fiddle with the wires of the computer she was using next to me. And while my computer setup is plugged into a surge protector that is by the computer she was using, and when she moved some of the wires in the back of her computer, she accidentally hit the switch on the surge protector and shut down my setup completely. The sad part was that I never saved, And while I was working, Clip Paint didn't autosave at all, even though I have it set to do an autosave every 10 minutes. It just decided not to for some reason. And my capture software didn't capture any of it because the file was corrupted since it couldn't save properly because of how my computer shut down. So basically I lost everything I did. You can probably imagine the many feelings I was feeling. Reagan felt really bad, and I know she didn't mean to, so I didn't get upset with her. I was just not looking forward to starting from scratch. One part that was funny is that I was being super quiet. I just wasn't talking, and Reagan was also being quiet, but then she just kind of randomly says, "So, how do you want to go about killing me?" I bursted into laughter and replied with, "I'm not going to kill you." After that, I kind of just took a few minutes to collect myself and just started drawing. You would think I would try to just redraw my idea from before, but I decided not to, and I felt like it would be better to just draw something different. I knew that if I tried to do the same thing again, I would always wonder if it was as good as the first attempt. Plus, like I said, it was more complicated and I had lost the reference I had made for myself, so I tried doing something a bit more in my comfort zone. That being said, I did still play with the perspective and tried doing something a little bit more dynamic. Since I was starting over, I kind of just went with the first thing I thought of, and it's this pose of Trix kind of looking up at us and we're looking down at her. She is turning towards us a bit and putting one hand in her hoodie pocket while the other is kind of in a gesturing position. It's kind of a similar pose that is drew for Trix, but I do feel like this pose really shows Trix's personality, so I wanted to do something kind of similar. One thing I am a bit sad about for this pose is that it doesn't really show her body type very well because the hoodie hides most of it. The picture I drew originally, I tried to capture her more curvy body type, and I did also try to do it here. It's just not super visible. For the more areas I would consider being in shadow, I filled them in with scribbles or lines. I really like doing this, and it's one of my favorite additions to this style. Oh, also Trix has a design on her shirt. I chose not to add it because I felt like it would have been cramped, and the tiny details felt like they would have been out of place with the chunky shapes of the anti-style, so I decided to not include it. I hope that's okay. Oh, also for the hand, I had all 3 fingers up except for the pinky, but then when I tried to do that pose, I couldn't do it without putting my ring finger down also, so I changed the hand to make the ring finger also be down. It was kind of funny because I kept trying to do the pose, but I just couldn't. I had to put my ring finger down too. Now it's time for the coloring. Originally my anti-style used very desaturated colors since it's supposed to be the opposite of what I usually do. But in this video, I decided to change my coloring style because I found the dull colors to be very underwhelming and I didn't really like them. So I made everything super saturated again. I really like how in Iz's drawing, Trix's hoodie has white outlines, so I decided to include this element in mine as well. I changed my line art in some areas to white, and later I actually changed it to yellow to kind of match the color scheme more. I may try to do this for this style more often. I really like the look of it and it feels really cool. And I really like how I can use just straight up black, because a lot of times I can't because I still want us to see the line art. But if I make the line art a different color, I can just use black. I didn't know what to do for the background, so I just took something I liked from Clip Paint and applied it in a rectangle shape. I feel like this pattern fit the feeling of the piece nicely. Next I'm adding the highlights. For my anti-style to keep things sharp feeling, I don't use any soft shading. All of the shadows and highlights are applied with a sharp edge. For the colors of the highlights on one side, I use the same yellow as the eyes. I wanted to include more of that yellow in the color scheme. And to contrast with the yellow, I will use a purple magenta-like color for the highlights on the right side of the objects. I think it's really cool that Trix is an anthropomorphic caterpillar. It's not something I've really seen before, and I think it's really cool. I really like how she has the horns on her head, and all of her different colors work really nicely together. She's a really cool character. I did forget to mention that I chose all the characters myself this time around for this video. A lot of times I will randomly pick, however I wanted to pick one character for each style. So this kind of required I pick them myself. And when I saw Trix, I was like, oh, she would be so cool in my anti-style. So when Iz requested to have Trix be drawn in my anti-style, I was very pleased. And I knew I wanted to draw her. Also, it did make me kind of happy that a lot of people still wanted me to draw their characters in my normal style. It actually kind of surprised me how many of them did. Many people would say, I would like my character in your normal style or in one of your other styles. Or they would just say they want it in my normal style. it's nice to know that people still like my normal style. Ever since I started experimenting with other styles, I do get comments saying that they like the other ones more than my normal style, which is totally fair. Everyone has different tastes, and there are things I really like about my other styles. But it's nice knowing people like my main style as well. It is my main style and the main way I draw, and I like it as well. So it's nice knowing people still like it. Since I didn't get to draw my main style for this video, I will probably do another video in the near future, only with illustrations drawn in my main style. And I'll make this either a gotcha character video or an original character video. We'll see which one I go with. And I'll make sure to update you. I've been making sure to announce things on shorts, so make sure to keep your eye on those. But lastly, for the picture, I added some quickly drawn stars. I don't know, things felt kind of empty, so I added them in kind of on a whim. But I feel like they were a nice addition. So here's Tricks and all the other illustrations. This was a lot of fun to do, and I really liked experimenting with my other styles and pushing the styles in a way that works for characters that aren't my own. Thank you so much to everyone that submitted characters. I had so much fun looking at them all and had a super hard time choosing who to draw. There were so many amazing characters to choose from. And a special thank you again to Ephemeral Opal, Dreamy Boba, and Iz for letting me draw their characters. They were all so much fun to draw. And I have another thank you to say, and it's a big thank you to my awesome YouTube members and Patreon patrons for your support. It means so much to me. Oh, and thank you for watching this video. We have all the thank yous today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!